What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Recently, Putin has found himself confronted with reality he can no longer ignore. The national currency, the ruble, has lost again significant value, almost 10% in just a couple of days, forcing citizens to gather around currency exchange boards rather than rallying behind the war rhetoric of the regime. In response, state propaganda has intensified its efforts to divert public attention. Rather than addressing pretty unfavorable exchange rates and the inevitable inflation that trails a weakening currency, the media and leadership figures have chosen to highlight a most recent technological marvel and the creation of war, the Oreshnik missile system. This supposed strategic asset, which Russian media now presents as a game-changing weapon, shadowing any possible Western equivalence, has been forced into the spotlight as if it could magically eclipse economic hardships. In a climate shaped by propaganda, diplomatic posturing, and economic anxiety, the Russian government's attempts to shift public focus from exchange rates and just overall bad economic conditions to missile specifications serve as nothing more than just yet another attempt by Putin to try and save his face. And guess what? Very smart people who know a thing or two about how economics works, unlike Putin looks like, try to give Putin advice how to make things better. A really good advice, if you ask me. But Putin, being notoriously stubborn and preferring to destroy his economy, country, and potentially even his own regime, he decided to proceed with his own plan, hoping that some sort of a financial miracle will happen. The story with him trying to use the magnificence of Oreshnik missile in order to cover rising economical problems is just an attempt to delay the inevitable. In his own world, where he lives for many decades, people were supposed to forget everything, that the prices are twice higher, that salaries remain the same, and that there is less food on the table. And just as soon as they heard the inevitable and unbelievable specifications of Oreshnik, such as being able to reach 10 Mach speeds, a little faster than 3 km per second, and that the epicenter of the impact, the temperature, reaches and exceeds 4000 Celsius, more than 7000 Fahrenheit. But surprisingly for Putin, people care more about not being able to afford basic necessities, rather than threatening NATO with another missile creation. Such an ungrateful and egoistic nation, Putin must be thinking. The current situation emerged in full view when the ruble's value took yet another serious dip. Such events started happening at alarming rate in Russia, and it seems everyone is concerned at this point. Everyone besides Putin. All he has on his mind is Oreshnik and war in Ukraine, definitely not his country's economics and the well-being of Bashar al-Assad and the future of Syria. No way. A weakening currency affects every aspect of everyday life, making groceries more expensive and future savings less reliable. Imagine yourself as an about-to-retire person whose life savings in rubles became 20% less valuable in under 2 weeks. Just like that, 1/5 of your life is now worth nothing. But this crisis obviously did not unfold in silence. Elvira Nabiullina, the head of the Central Bank of Russia, tried to reach Putin for months, and it was all in vain, like speaking to a wall. Eventually she was able to give him an unambiguous advice that by simply ending the war, the state of the Russian economy will improve significantly and immediately. And this pretty good advice was heard, but dismissed, most likely as the Western propaganda. And as the numbers on the exchange rate display boards climbed higher, the official response grew louder and more ridiculous. Instead of confronting the economic facts, the authorities launched into a conspicuous celebration of sophisticated weaponry, rather than at least trying to explain why the ruble is collapsing and asking people to wait a little bit longer before things get better. Voices from the top asked them to imagine fearsome missiles flying through the skies at supersonic speeds, putting fear into the eyes of demons from the West and drug addicts in Kiev. All the other problems, especially the insignificant ones, such as the value of the national currency, not significant problem, should disappear without question, facing the might of Russia's nuclear arsenal. This approach has the most typical Putin's logic behind it. If people can be forced to admire the superiority of a missile or to tremble at its terrifying destructive force, perhaps they will stop complaining about the inflation and currency devaluation. But the reaction of the public is not something what Putin expected, because they appear increasingly immune to these attempts at misdirection. Use this method once and it is super effective. Use it twice and it will still work on most people. But the more you use the same tactics, the less efficient it becomes. Not the first time Putin uses this method just to discover its vanishing effect. Think about how many nuclear threats he made in the past until everyone literally stopped caring. In late November, the Collective Security Treaty Organization happened in Astana, Kazakhstan, bringing together leaders such as Vladimir Putin, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, Alexander Lukashenko, Sadir Japarov, and Emomali Rahmon, leaders of Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan respectively. Diplomatic gatherings are generally understood as forums for important matters of regional cooperation and security. So it came as a surprise when the Russian president diverted the entire meeting's agenda towards a lecture on Oreshnik and other missiles capabilities. I'm not even kidding. Instead of engaging in a meaningful conversation about pressing regional concerns or economic stability, Putin shifted the attention to the specifications of various Western missiles such as the Storm Shadow, the French Scalp, and the German Towers, comparing their ranges, speeds, warhead masses, and the destructive capabilities with Russian equivalents, such as once again Oreshnik. Imagine yourself trying to pass history exam, and when a professor asks you a question, what is a Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact? The topic which is most likely prohibited in Russia. Then you start talking about the tactics of a fury warrior in the Molten Core raid against boss named Ragnaros. The confusion on your professor's face will be exactly the same what the leaders of still Putin-friendly countries had, when he suddenly started talking about Oreshnik explosion epicenter temperatures reaching almost the same temperatures as the surface of the sun. Yet, they allowed him to continue. After all, what does the healthcare budget of Dushanbe, capital of Tajikistan, has to do with Oreshnik splitting its targets in atoms upon detonation? Somehow, Putin made the parallels. Anyways, the sudden pivot to missile statistics had all the signs of an improvised destruction. Its awkwardness was tangible. Putin even went further to humiliate himself and said that it was them who begged Putin to talk about the specifications and comparisons of Western versus Russian missiles. It was them who needed to know this as much as Putin, because NATO will not spare these countries once it is done with Russia. I now only wonder how hard the leaders of other countries had to try not to laugh or to smile when Putin looked directly at them, saying that all the decision-making centers in Kiev will turn to dust, if Russia is obviously allowed to unleash its full potential. Except maybe Lukashenko. He might have believed at least some of Putin's words. The Oreshnik missile system has been presented as a technological game changer. Russian state media, seizing on any American-sounding endorsement to bolster credibility, eagerly quoted a tweet by a supposed US-based researcher Mike Adams, also known on X Twitter under the name of Health Ranger, declaring that the Oreshnik brought an end to NATO's strategic advantages. Russian propaganda enthusiastically cited this expert, saying that his opinion represents the opinion of the White House and the entire American population. Little did they know that Mike Adams is a relatively popular conspiracy theorist. Another one of such discoveries made by him claims that the trails that planes leave in the sky are special military-grade biochemicals, which alter people's brains' neuroconnections to make it easier to mind-control them in the future. So yes, Russian propaganda citing him as the main source of inside information from the White House makes everything pretty unreliable, I would say. Not surprisingly, the Russian propaganda did not attempt to verify credentials or consider the source's dubious claims. Instead, they found this single tweet Mike Adams made as another golden opportunity to distract the people of Russia. Look, they said, even Americans are afraid of our new missile. Western analysts have been blindsided, and the Oreshnik is a weapon to reorder the global chessboard in Russia's favor. This message resonated poorly, however, with domestic audience seeking economic stability rather than militaristic fantasies. The more the propaganda machine invested in tales of wondrous armaments, the more the public's gaze seemed to linger on exchange rate boards, flashing unfavorable numbers. Due to unknown to Putin reasons, people care more about affordable food on their table, rather than emulating temperatures of a ballistic missile. For all the government's attempts at redirection, the reality is that ordinary Russians are not so easily swayed. They may live within an authoritarian framework where dissent is punishable, but this does not translate into collective trustfulness. It is exactly the opposite. The average citizen is well aware of the link between weakening ruble and the rising cost of living. The same public that learned to keep its political opinions guarded understands the mathematics of currency exchange with good precision. Missiles may be fascinating to some, but they are an abstraction. Inflation and prices hikes are immediate, pressing, and undeniable. History shows that warfare and militaristic rhetoric can temporarily divert attention, especially when citizens feel compelled to display loyalty or when patriotism surges during moments of perceived existential threat. Yet today, the distraction is failing. People are smarter than they used to be, and they can distinguish obvious propaganda methods when they see one. Despite the relentless efforts to restart the war obsession or convince the population of an impending strategic triumph, daily life continues to revolve around tangible economic conditions. The promise back to normal life, stable prices, affordable goods, and a currency that does not shrink by the day remains far more meaningful than ecstatic details about missile characteristics or hypothetical global dominance. The present environment reveals a harsh for Putin truth. Modern societies cannot be as simply misled as some autocratic leaders would hope. The diminishing returns of war propaganda, the lack of enthusiasm for prolonged conflict, and the steady prioritization of personal financial security over abstract military glory, all of this underlines a fundamental human tendency. People respond to immediate self-interest and tangible well-being far more than they do to theatrical narratives of distant battlefields or strategic wonder weapons. The very disconnect between the government's chosen focus and the public's actual priorities reveal the complete failure of old propagandistic tools in modern world. And after all, Putin might be right. The people of Russia are egoistic and only think about themselves. They do not care about Putin's new obsession, Oreshnik. They do not like his war. They only care about living in peace and having certainty in tomorrow. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow. We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.